Yes. Hello.
Yeah, Akhilesh, want to say
Sir,
something?
for, sir, for the project, like what are the guidelines? Like, do we select any problem that we would like to solve, or how does that how does that work, sir?
Yeah, so for the project in the course, those who are with us since the beginning of this smart manufacturing courses, they are trying to identify some of the problem with the industry. So they have already done some learning in terms of the IoT implementation and AR implementation of certain use cases they are familiar with. But those who have joined new in this program only, idea is to pick an industrial problem. So we were hoping that either we can pick up a live problem from the industry. So we were expecting that you will be in communication with someone to understand the problems related to the quality, related to the maintenance, and then we'll try to get some data and then try to apply the analytics, because we would like to show some results out of this analytics that the end user should appreciate. Same in case if it is not possible to have a live data for any scenario, we can still be picking up any of the prominent manufacturing related problem, and then maybe using some data set available, or we will be generating some of the simulated data and then try to implement. But in that case, we may not be very well able to correlate the results that are coming out of that. So idea behind the project is that the learning should be deployed. You need to pick up some of the hardware or the machines where you would like to apply the machine learning techniques. So starting from the data capture to the analytics and then communicating the results back to the user, uh, I think that is something we are looking forward.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
I think the lathe machine problem is one good example. So Vishnu may be attempting that. I hope so, because the MTech student who has done the vibration monitoring on the lathe machine, I think he might have shared the data also. So we have some live data on some of the machines, and otherwise we can pick up some of the milling machine data, or the lathe machine data even from the data sets available on the cloud, or the predictive maintenance specifically for the machine tools or the manufacturing facility. I think we look forward for that kind of an example.
And sir.
uh, One of the problem that we have attempted in our automation lab also regarding the tool wear on the high speed milling process, I think that is another example that we were attempting. So there are many use cases, we need to figure it out. Maybe in the next live discussion we may have uh, some idea about which project you are doing. Today we will be finishing some of the learning about the same, about the project, because that is what we were discussing, the important steps involved in the project. So you may define your project around that. In between also, if you need any help, you can just let me know, we can finalize the project together. Okay. So last time we discussed some of the steps, identifying the label, identifying the business use case. Now today we will be discussing the step 4, defining the performance and the success. I think this is a very important step in the machine learning, and it requires a lot of domain understanding when we are talking about the performance and the success. How your model is performing, how you can judge that actually. So I think there are certain parameters which associated with each algorithm, which indicates how accurately this model is predicting. But whatever number you will be getting, whether it's an 85%, 87%, 90%, or 76%, how you will define that, which accuracy is good, or where you should stop doing experimentation with the model, and then you are ready for the deployment. So how do I measure the quality of the algorithm? So whatever algorithm you have deployed, how can I measure the quality of the algorithm? So there is some statistical measures which are coming out after the deployment of the algorithm, and most of these algorithms are having in terms of the root mean square error, or maybe the confusion matrix. Those are some of the indicators of the quality of the algorithm. But out of that, those numbers, how you will decide that now it's a right trained model and I should deploy that. So there are certain data science quality measures about the algorithms that is what some of them I was mentioning about. And most of them are the mathematical and statistical parameters. Now, there is a very important understanding or learning should happen at this stage. We are trying to solve a business problem. Again, I will be emphasizing on this aspect, and it is very important to discuss today. Because when we are trying to analyze the success of the algorithm or the machine learning deployment, we need to see the implication of the outcomes. For example, when we talk about a model, which says that root mean square error is only 15%. What does it mean actually? What does it mean? That is what we need to understand in the business sense, not in the statistical parameters. So most of the experiments we used to do in the regression and in the academics, we are just trying to have a highest possible root mean, the fit actually, the highest possible score for the fit. So in that case, if you see 95% is the best one, but to achieve 95%, there are a lot of things to be done. So if you spend another 7 to 10 days in just trying to find out a right fit, right data set, then you may be losing the value over there. So you need to decide at certain point where you have to stop now and where you need to apply this model in the business. So there's a certain approach which we call in a business oriented way. There's a very good learning over here. When we say business oriented way, what does it mean? Let's see the example of the regression task. Now, in case of a regression task, there is always a true value. That is the actual happening. Something is going to happen, and what is the value of that? For example, the actual price of the house that you will get. But then your algorithm may be predicting either an overestimation or it will be giving an underestimation. Now, these overestimation and underestimations, mathematically, the errors that are given by the regression algorithms, they are symmetric. When I say symmetric error means, if I have a true value equidistant from the overestimated and underestimated value, mathematically they are same. So for example, if I say that true value is 5 and I'm overestimating it as 7 and underestimating it as a 3, mathematically they are same, because 5 minus 3 is 2 and 7 minus 5 is also 2. So if you see that now the statistical measures, though they are coming in such a way that the errors on the plus side or the minus side is equally same. We don't understand what is the impact. But in case of a business sense, this has a different impact or different severity. So different severity in terms of the business problem at hand. So let's try to see. That is what I was just explaining. In case of these algorithms, what I just mentioned to you, that the statistical performance measures are the symmetrical. But in case of a business, the impacts are different. So if I'm supposed to do the packaging of something actually, so I think depending on the demand, if I have to prepare the packages of certain quantity, and if the requirement for the less quantity keep on coming, then I'm not estimating it correctly. So then I need to do repacking the whole stuff again, and it will incur certain loss to me, or there may be certain delay in delivering that. Same is with the classification task. Now here we have classification that may happen, it's in a false negative, or there may be in a false positive. So I think we'll try to understand from the example of a medical quick test. All of you understand what does it mean by the false negative and false positive?
No, sir.
Okay. So let me just try to explain it. When I say false positive, you don't have that symptom and it is predicted you have that. So when we take an example of a medical quick test, let's take an example of any disease, or let's take an example of COVID itself. So if you have these tests which are available, the RT-PCR or rapid antigen test, there are a lot of false negative and false positive outcomes, especially when it is coming to the rapid antigen test. So if you see that, if you conduct a test and which predict false, it means that it's a false positive means you have a given disease. It's predicting, now it is predicting that you have a given disease. You don't have that disease. For example, I go for a test and it says that I'm a positive, but I really don't have a positive. I don't have any symptom. I am not positive at all, but it is predicting that you are positive. So it's in a false positive. Means whatever positive prediction happens, that is not correct. So in that case, what will be the implications? Let's try to understand that. When it is false positive, what is the implication of the same? I don't have a disease, but it is predicted that I had a disease. So what I should do that, then I will start taking additional precautions. I may start some medications also, and to do a little more confirmatory on the same. So for example, let's say take a case of this COVID itself. So somebody will suggest go for the CT scan and go for some additional test, and I'll start consuming some of the medicines also. So that is the situation, the false positive prediction. If it is happening, I will end up in spending little more. But if you see that, what is the implication as compared to the false negative? Are they have the same implication? So can you respond to that? If I have a false positive, it means that I don't have a disease, but the test predict that I have a disease. The second situation is that it's in a false negative. I have a disease, but test is predicting I don't have a disease. So do you think that the predictions in the both side of this true value, they have the same implication on your health?
False negative is more dangerous.
Yes, yes. So that is something we need to understand. In case of now, you have understood it well. When we are saying that the measures that are coming out with the statistics, they look same actually. They are not going to make a much difference in terms of the numerical values or the numbers that you are getting. But what we are trying to understand, they have a different impact on the business. So false positive has a different impact, and false negative will have a different impact. So that is what you are said is right. When it is being predicted negative, false negative, and you really have a disease, fine. So test result indicate that you don't have a disease, but you have a disease. Now what will happen? In that case, you will not be taking care, and you will be casual, and then you will be spending days without treatment. And sometimes when the diseases are severe, then every day counts over there. And you may realize after 7-10 days that you are positive now. You had a disease. So you have lost the period that you can use it for treatment. So these kind of situations may be detrimental. Sometimes it may even go to deteriorate your health severely, and then sometimes lead to the death also. So these kind of implications in case of false positive, I have just spent little additional. I will got little cautious about the same. But false negative may lead to the conditions that may result into the death of a patient. So they don't have the same implications, though they appear having the same implications. So when I do the classification and once I get the confusion matrix around that, then I need to analyze the result from a business perspective, not from the statistical perspective. So that is the important point, and then we will discuss this also. So we understand that common data science measures are of equal severity because they're number wise, the quantity wise, they're equally same. But these measures are thus misleading in the business environment and should be avoided. That is what you have understood also. We may not be just going by the root mean square error or the confusion matrix and then decided, yeah, this model is now ready to deploy, unless you assess the implication of that model properly. And that kind of assessment, we call it a value-based performance measures. So I think this is something in a unique learning that you should take from the deployment on the business. And unless you are quantifying them correctly, or you will also be in a situation to avoid the losses because of this implementation. I think there you can play a big important role. So let's try to understand what are these value-based performance measures. So I will discuss in detail today. Same is with the case of the predictive maintenance scenarios. So you will be having in a false positive and false negative in the predictive maintenance. So can we just have a quick understanding, because I'm sure that if you are understanding the false positive, false negative, let's see that if I have to apply this to the predictive maintenance. And so in that case, I will be just monitoring a part which may fail. So I will be getting a sensor data. I will be trying to analyze the data coming out from the machine. And I may predict early that part may fail. Actually, it is not going to fail. That is one scenario. Another scenario, that part failed, but I am not able to predict it correctly. And then I'm predicting that it is going to fail after 7 days or 10 days, but it failed early. So these are the two situations where you may end up in doing the underestimation and overestimation in the algorithm, and that is inherent into the algorithm. I think that's the point we should understand. We are not able to avoid that, because these are all probabilistic measures that we are getting right now. It's not a deterministic approach that if I place these two values into the equation and it says that this part is failing on 4th day. That kind of prediction never happens over here. So it's quite possible that how many times I will predict the false positive, how many times I will be predicting false negative, right? So if you see the predictive maintenance scenario, if I am predicting false, the part is false positive, for example, the part is not going to fail right now, but I predicted that it may go fail. So I replaced it early in the machine. Only what I have done that I have not used the remaining useful life of the part, and I have replaced the part before. So certainly only I may lost some cost onto that on the part price, and that is how it is happening, right? Now, in case of a false negative, the prediction goes negative, and I failed to predict that part is going to fail, and part failed actually. Now you can see the implication of the part now get failed, and the machine comes to the breakdown. And when the machine comes to the breakdown, it means that now you are going to replace a part, or you are going to order a part. It will remain in the state of breakdown for certain hours or days. You will be losing the business, and then it has a far more severe impact onto the whole scenario. So that is something we need to understand from the predictions that are coming out of these algorithms, and then decide based on the understanding of the business implications. So that is what is known as value-based performance measures. So that we will discuss today in detail also. And then how you will decide the project is successful when you deploy the machine learning project, and how we will decide that project is successful. When can I call the project a success? You deployed something, and then how you can decide that now whatever you have implemented is a good measure actually. So certainly you look forward for some savings happening, or you will be trying. Now in this case, there are two scenarios. One thing, nobody has solved that problem earlier. That is one possibility. Second thing, there is already a method to solve the problem, but now I'm trying to attempt with the machine learning approach. In both the cases, I need to compare, and that is what is known as baseline. So baseline is something should be known to you at the time of formulation of the project itself. So if I'm trying to implement a predictive maintenance scenario, I should know that what kind of losses happened because of the machine breakdown in the past, right? If I'm talking about the predictive quality analytics and I'm trying to apply the machine learning, we should be clear about that. What amount of the rejection happens because of the poor quality monitoring, or it is not being corrective action not being taken in time. So what are the total losses incurred because of the quality rejections? So if I have some baseline figure today, so in all your projects which you are trying to do in this course, you have to define the baseline, and all these things what we are discussing, different steps, you have to address those steps in your project. So in that case, if someone is attempting the problem in a different way, I should know that and what is the outcome of that method. And then when I am trying to deploy the machine learning, and I should be able to compare with that baseline today. Fine. So when is the model good enough? That is what I was just mentioning, so that you can stop iterations and then you are ready to say deployment. So because when I was just mentioning the workflow for the machine learning, we said the evaluation of the model. Now, how you decide that this model is now evaluated for the deployment? Now it is okay, the fit is right, and let's apply that model. Many times in academics, we go with this kind of measures and we say that, yeah, 90% fit is very good, 85% is very good. So my results are in very close resemblance with the experimental data. And I can say that, yeah, this model is correct now. We cannot go so casual in case of a business, because even a 2% here and there, as we have seen that, the implications may be completely different. So we need to just assess that part. And that is what we call it's a decent value actually. So moving to deployment as soon as the model generates a decent value. Now it is completely subjective. What is the decent value? So if I'm trying to do a regression, I'm trying to predict a remaining useful life. And if my model is start predicting 85% correct value, can I say that that's a decent value? Now it is ready to deploy. Let's go for the deployment. Or still I need to improve the model further by changing few more parameters. And let's try to get 87% or 90%. So if that is the scenario, many times you may not be able to reach to the perfection actually. So that's how you will be losing your time and resources in doing all these iterations. So it's very important to decide when is the decent value that you should stop iterating and you should be ready for the deployment of the model. So that's how you need to define the success criteria of the project. And that is how it is being deciding that, yeah, now once you reach that success criteria, once the success criteria being met, I should go for the deployment. So identify the first performance milestone, and that defines your minimum viable product. It means that whatever, if you have achieved that first performance milestone, I should go for the deployment. I should not further keep on doing iterating on the same model. And that is what's coming out. What should you use for your baseline? So from where this baseline is coming to you. So I think that is an important part you should understand. The last step we will be discussing is the profile generation. Profile generation means from where your data is coming. So we have already discussed the business problem at hand. We have discussed what you want to predict. Now, how success looks like, because we have understood now how to define the success of a model and how to see the decent value coming out of this model. The last thing left out is what kind of data you can use to make your predictions. Now, data is something very important to understand, and we need to identify the right data set. And that is where I was again emphasizing, or I was earlier emphasizing and again emphasize the same point. The domain understanding is very important, and understanding of the data from that perspective is very important here. Many times this is the misconception about the machine learning or deep learning, that people believe that you just throw some data into the model and the problem will get solved. I think that is something we should not take after taking up this course. We should always be careful that whatever is coming out of the model, what kind of implication it has and how accurately it is predicting, it's all depend on the quality of data that you are putting inside the model. So we should not take this as simple as that you throw the data into the deep learning model and the problem will get solved. So we need to see from where I'm getting the data, what kind of questionnaire should be there that I should follow up to at least reach out to the right data set. Many times you find that there are enough parameters that are impacting the outcome. So we should not go with all those parameters. So there are certain techniques for the dimensional reduction. I think we need to learn all those aspects also. Now, when we talk about the profile generation, we look forward for the data should be complete and dense. Now, these are the two criteria that should be met by the data. When I say complete, we need to understand that we should have all the data points, all sort of information that will be useful for predicting through the algorithm. So that is what we should mean by the complete. And when it comes to the dense, we should also see that the minimal number of certain attributes should be good enough to do the prediction. So at the same time, it should also have a complete information. So in terms of the data point that we collected, they should have a complete information to use the algorithm for prediction. But at the same time, we need to also look forward that as low number of the individual attributes, we should try to achieve the same objective with the as less number of parameters or less number of individual attributes. So this thing we need to see. So initially we always have large number of attributes impacting the outcome, but slowly we will be identifying which are the least impacting attributes, which we can drop them out. So that is how the technique of dimensionality reduction of the principal component analysis will help in that sense. Yeah, Akhilesh, you can ask the question.
Sir, in the previous slide, you mentioned that you have to verify whether the model is in a state of deployment or not, right?
Yes, yes.
Considering the factors such as RSME or false negative or false positive.
Correct, correct.
Like how do we define those? So I mean, suppose I have developed a model for some problem.
Yes,
consider it as predictive maintenance for predicting the remaining useful life.
Okay? Correct.
Suppose if I get an accuracy of 96% or 97%, how do I decide, or on what basis should I come to a conclusion that okay, 97% is a good thing and now I'm in a position to deploy it? When it comes to medical, it should be more, or like, is there any basis for it? Or
so today we'll discuss that. That's, you have rightly pointed out. I think that's a very important aspect we should understand. So I have the discussion for those aspects today. That is what the value-based approach, what it should be. So we'll take one example today, and then we'll explain you how to decide the decent value onto that. Okay. So we'll discuss after this only. I think I have that discussion in today's class. I planned for that. So we'll discuss that aspect. How you will assess the business value of a particular model and how you will decide that's a decent one to go ahead. Right. So we'll discuss on that part. And you can apply the similar learning for any of the machine learning outcomes and decide that, this is a decent model. This is decent value that you get it. Now you can go for the deployment. So we'll discuss that today. Now, in terms of the data, we are just mentioning here that it should be complete and dense because if you just see the example of the handwriting recognition. So there's a data set of recognizing the different alphabets in handwriting. There are as many as 60 features actually, which will be impacting the correctness of the alphabet that you are predicting. Now, if you go by these 60 features and try to fit any of the model, I think that is going to create a lot of problems because it's never going to fit correctly, first of all. Then it will also take a lot of computational time and the complexity of the algorithm will be very high. So in that case, that's how the people have come out with these methods, which I was mentioning that. The dimensionality reduction or the principal component analysis, we need to find out. And once you plot that, actually, you will recognize that from certain visualization itself, you will come to an understanding that only the first 6 variables are having an 85% impact onto the outcome, and remaining 54 variables are just having a 15% of the impact. So I think this kind of an analysis and reducing the model will help, reducing the number of attributes will help in implementing the algorithm much faster. So we'll go with some of these learnings also. I will also look forward that if you can also explore yourself some of the basic learning. So we'll provide some of the e-learning approach. You should also attempt that during the day. So what we should do that, we will try to use the duration between the lab and the live session so that we'll be getting more ideas how these can be solved and what are the issues with the current deployment methods. So we need to understand where does your data come from, at what point is the data available, that we need to see. So let's see the data preparation part. And we all understand and appreciate that machine learning is too much dependent on the quality of the data and the type of data that you will be having. Now let's see from where you will get this data. For example, if you're talking about the predictive maintenance data, let's have a quick discussion. If you're supposed to implement a predictive maintenance use case using machine learning, what are the possible data sources for you? Now, please tell me, because I think some of you are working on an industry project also for predictive maintenance. So from where you will get the data? Let's talk about the predictive maintenance of the lathe machine itself. So what are the data sources for you from where you will be collecting the data?
Vibration sensor.
Yeah, so one is the real-time data. That is what you have mentioned, that the vibration data, that is the real-time data that you will be capturing. So we can have vibration data. We can have the energy consumption of the peak current data.
Audio files.
Which one?
Audio files.
Yeah, acoustic sensing data. Acoustic sensing can also be a helpful parameter. So acoustic sensing, vibration sensing, temperature.
Manually written some kind of maintenance.
Yes,
data.
I think that's very important over here, because some of the data about because we always try to get the baseline also. So we need to extract some of the data from the previous maintenance also. So I think that is an important aspect. So some of the data is lying in an unstructured format in some of the documents that are being maintained, and along with the specifications of the machine also. So previous failure events is also one of the important data, and sometimes you will be using those data sets for the labeling also for the initial data point. So historical data about the machine performance and maintenance, and also the static information about the machine regarding the specification and other parameters. So there are now three types of data we are looking for. One is certainly the live data, that is the real-time data that you have seen, that all the sensors, all the input that is coming related to the operations will be captured. But apart from that, you also look at the historical data and the information related to the machine also. So now let's try to see that how we'll get that. Yeah, Mukhtar.
Sir, what do you mean by this semi-unstructured data? That three types of data: structured data and unstructured. That is clear, but semi-structured, that is not.
No. So unstructured only. I'm not saying semi-structured. It's a structured means that you know that which data points to be captured. When I say unstructured means you are not clear which data points to be captured, and some of the data may be lying in the different files or documents actually that need to be used actually for this prediction. So for example, the new case, let me just explain you with this example also. So when we talk about the data preparation, these are something we should be aware of. First of all, what question do we want the machine learning to answer? That is something is very important. And we have seen this in the labels also. Our labels will be deciding what answer I am expecting out of the question and what kind of questions the machine learning should respond to. Second thing is important. Is it possible to answer this question with the data that is available? So I think that is an important aspect, because if you are trying to deploy the machine learning algorithm, you may not start afresh from today's data itself. There is certain data which is required from the historical inputs, or I should say that as I was mentioning, the previous maintenance data. Let's take an example of lathe machine itself. So before I go for what kind of sensors to be integrated into the machine, and how I will be having an understanding about the potential failures of the machine. So I think those kind of questions are useful in deciding which type of data set is useful for solving a predictive maintenance problem for the machine. So let's take an example of this lathe machine itself. So not lathe, this is a grinding machine. Let's take an example of this. So certain questions should be answered to focus on the data, and that is most crucial, so that even the selection of the sensors is very important. Though today we say that, yeah, I need a vibration sensor data, I need an acoustic emission data, but where exactly you want to deploy them, where exactly you want to place them. So let's go with this quick understanding. Now, first question is that what type of failures happened on this machine? So now I will be looking at the unstructured previous data, because that data set is right now not available to me, because I'm trying to address a machine. I'm trying to frame a machine learning problem for a particular machine tool. So I need to dig out that data. What kind of predictive maintenance happened earlier? What kind of preventive maintenance happened? Not predictive. What kind of preventive maintenance has happened on this machine earlier? What kind of breakdowns happened onto this machine in the past? So those kind of unstructured data, when I say unstructured data, means that is not available into your system right now. And they are being maintained in different logbooks and the data records, which you need to pull out now. Is that clear, Mukhtar, what I'm just trying to say in the previous
Yes,
case?
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I need to first get a sense what type of failures are happening onto this machine, right? Before I come to that, what kind of sensing to be deployed on this machine. Now, once we know that there are certain type of failures, we need to decide which type of failure I want to predict through the machine learning now. So there may be possibility that there are many types of failures happened on this machine. Sometimes the spindle, the wheel break out, or may the spindle go out of run, or there may be scenarios that there are the variation in the table speed on this grinding machine. So there are many possibilities actually, because there could happen that there may be many past failures happen on this machine. So out of those, we need to find out which is most prominent and which one I want to predict right now. That is the another question we should answer. Then once I am sure that I want to predict this type of failure, then the question will come, is this kind of failure happens all of a sudden? So for example, the wheel break, is that kind of problem, the wheel breaking on a grinding machine, is that happen all of a sudden? Or there's a slow decline in the performance of certain parameters. So I think that is something we need to see what kind of failures are there into this machine and how they are happening, at what speed they are happening. Now, this will help us in selecting what kind of parameters to be monitored onto this machine. After that, once I found that this type of failures happen, now we will go down further. Which component is associated with this failure? Now in this machine, I will find it out whether the spindle is the responsible part, or the table is the responsible part, or a particular lead screw is the responsible part of this, or maybe the limit switches at the end stop are the responsible component for this. So there are many components which may lead to the failure, which we are trying to address right now. So once we come to this layer, that I will be able to find out which component is associated with the failure. Then I go with the parameters to measure. Now, which parameter will give me an indicator of the failure of this component? So now, as you see that if the grinding wheel is running at a very high speed and it is running out of the actual run, then we need to find out how much is the run out. And then because of that, I may need to see that I need to sense the vibration that will be increasing because of this run out, because of the unbalanced high speed rotation of the grinding wheel. That is the possibility. So in that case, which parameters to measure? And that is how we were discussing in the last few minutes, that we would like to look forward for certain vibration patterns. We are also interested in capturing some of the acoustic signals that are useful. Sometimes for measuring the bearing worn out conditions, so we will be placing the temperature sensor around the bearing, so that the generation of the heat will also be an indicator of the same. Sometimes we will be measuring the current consumed by the machine itself. So we need to see what all parameters we can measure, and which will be now giving me an indicator of this component failure. Apart from that, once we are clear that which parameter to measure, now we need to decide what frequency and what accuracy you need to measure this. So we will be deciding the frequency of the measurement and then accuracy of the measurement, because my sensor selection will be greatly dependent on these understandings. So once I am having a sensor and I know that how fast this parameter is changing, Then we'll decide what is the sampling frequency. So I will be selecting a sample or the data acquisition system or the sensor which will be giving me that sort of variations. For example, in case of an acoustic sensor, we will be sensing the amplitude of that signal that we need to capture. And out of that, lot of audio signal that are coming in, what unique signal that you are trying to identify. So that kind of understanding is required. And then based on that understanding, we will be selecting the type of sensor as well as because when I select the type of sensor means I will be now deciding the data source for me. Now this will be the data source for my system. So once we have this kind of question answers around a particular system, we will be arriving at the right data points which are required to predict a particular type of failure. And that is how we should go with this kind of quick checks and question answers to decide I will be capturing the right data points which will be helping me in predicting a particular type of failure. Fine. So now with this, all these steps, what we discussed are now over. So we will be trying to follow these 5 steps, defining the business objectives, defining the labels, defining the success of the model, identifying the data points. So these are all steps we need to follow on a particular project. So let's try to apply this learning to your understanding on all your projects that you are thinking about. Now, apart from that, today's discussion, I will be taking around which this Akhilesh has raised this point. And I was also mentioning that how we'll decide that this model is going to predict correct for me. So machine learning models for the industry 4.0. Let's take an example and let's go by this. So this is a concept of the profit sensitive scoring. So whatever score that you are getting out of this machine learning models, they are just in a statistical scores. And now we are looking forward for the score which will be now impacting my profit, and it will be an indicator of the profit or loss that I can get out of this particular model. So we'll try to understand the machine learning models in terms of the financial impact, how that model is going to impact me financially, not just in terms of the data science. And then this is what we have seen, that how strong impact this have on our business, fine, and how we know that it will have a strong positive impact on your business, and to what level. We need to just try to predict the same. So this method or this technique of profit sensitive scoring is basically framing the data science problem into a financial problem, financial terms, because all business has understanding and better understanding of the finances. So any machine learning implementation, if you can quantify, that is what we always look forward. In other technologies, we are talking about the return on investment. Same is the case with the machine learning also. Once we deploy, how it is basically helping me in terms of the financial terms. So we need to convert those statistical outcomes into a scoring, which will be now measurable in terms of the financial terms. So we'll take a use case of predictive maintenance only. And this use case we are discussing now is a use case in the chemical processing. So let's take a chemical plant where this is a vat. We call it a vat, which is in a big container which is holding a chemical for during the processing itself. So this chemical vat is there in a plant, and the tendency of this chemical is that during processing it start foaming out, and there's a possibility that it may boil over, it will come out of this vat, right? So then that's a processing vessel. And so this chemical vat is the processing vessel where we have certain chemical, and during the processing itself, there's a tendency that this chemical may boil out and it will spill out of this vat and may incur in certain losses. Now, what is the situation? What will happen if it will come out of this vessel? First of all, the composition of this mixture will change. because the proportion that will be coming out in the form and the concentrate inside the vessel will now vary. And then we lost the complete value of this preparation. So that is the first thing, that mixture of the chemical is now incorrect, and then now it is of no use to me. So I lost the complete value of this content into this vessel. The another impact that it will have is that I need to clean the whole vessel. I need to stop it. I need to clean the whole vessel, and then I have to shut it down, and there will be a loss in the productivity. And then again clean up the whole mess and then get the whole vessel ready. It may take another 4 to 5 hours or kind of an operations, additional time, additional resources, and that is another impact on the business part. So two losses. One is I lost the complete chemical out of this vessel. The second is that I lost the time and resources in cleaning and getting it ready for the next use. So that is the impact over here. The good thing is that there is a solution available for handling this problem, which is an addition of an anti-foaming agent. So you can prevent this kind of a boiling if you add an anti-foaming agent into this. So once you decide that you will be adding an anti-foaming agent to this chemical, then the boiling will not happen, and then you will be able to avoid the situations that we were describing and understanding. The drawback is that this chemical, that which is anti-foaming chemical, is again costing something. So there's an additional cost associated with the use of this anti-foaming chemical into this. Now there's a possibility that you will add this anti-foaming chemical every time into this container. That is one scenario. One scenario will not add anything to this vessel, and then you will just allow whatever the possible spilling happening out of this vessel. And then we'll see that what is the business loss that you are incurring. Then third scenario comes if I apply any of the machine learning technique and then try to predict the overboil in this vessel. And based on that, if I will see that how many times I predicted correctly, and then maybe able to assess the losses that we can prevent into this. So that is the way we will be now trying to find out the methods and evaluate the decency of the machine learning model in that sense. So we'll go with the data science analysis. I think that is what we were discussing, confusion matrix in the classification problems. So confusion matrix is a simple matrix. If you can understand now, there are scenarios where you are having a real situation happening. So you have a real true outcome and you have a real false outcome. That is the actual scenario. Something is happening or something is not happening, fine. Then there's columns over here in the confusion matrix, which says predicted true outcome and predicted false outcome. So whatever you are predicting. So the rows are basically for the real outcomes, and columns are for the predictions that you are making. Now, certainly we would like to predict 100% that every time a situation is there, something is going to happen, I should predict it 100%, but that is an ideal scenario which may never come. So what we used to have over here, we'll have correct positive predictions. See that there is something going to happen, I have predicted correctly. So that will fall into this first green column over here. So real true outcome and the predicted true outcome. We call it a correct positive predictions. Right? Now there's a column here which says there's a true outcome, but it's not predicted. So there's a predicted false outcome. So incorrect negative predictions. So that is something that you have a disease, but it is not being predicted. So you have predicted it false. So that is the outcome that will come over here in the confusion matrix. Then there is a third section which says that real false outcome, this is not going to happen, but I am predicting that this has happened. The scenario where the test predicted that you have a disease, but I don't have a disease. So that is the situation comes over here. We call it incorrect positive predictions. Incorrect negative predictions. You predicted false. I was having a disease and you are saying test negative. Right? That is what is the predicted false outcome. And real false outcome situation doesn't happen, but we predict it. And most of the scenarios we try to apply these situations, right? And we are preparing something for that. We always trying to prepare for those situations. So machine learning help you a lot in doing that. And the last case is the correct negative predictions. Something is not going to happen, and I also predicted correctly. I think you can apply to the weather also, like in this way, that you predict there's a rain and the rain will happen. That is the first case. If you predict no rain condition and there's no raining happen, so that is the last correct prediction. So you have a correct positive predictions, you have a cell for the correct negative predictions. Other two are the incorrect ones, on incorrect negative predictions and incorrect positive predictions. So is this clear? Is the concept of the confusion matrix clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because this is an important understanding, and with this, based on that, we will be trying to see how much, because every classification algorithm, once you run it, it will give you this confusion matrix. Now, based on the outcome over here in the confusion matrix, I need to decide whether this model is good to fit now or if we need to do more iterations over here, right? Good. So let's go with the current predictions over here in the case of this chemical boiling problem. And we need to see the business impact out of this. Right? So now,
in this one, which one the incorrect are both, like one is true and predicted false, and one is false and it is predicted as true. Which one is more serious? We have to consider.
Yeah, we are coming. We are assessing the same only. Yeah, that is what the decency part we are checking it now. How it is going to impact, and that depends. And that is where we need to understand the domain part actually. So if I go by the number, what the statistician or the data scientist predicted, how can I believe that whether this is in a good model or a bad model? That is what we are trying to assess now. Fine. Okay. So let's try to understand this. Now, same confusion matrix. Now, this is something I will get from the model. So what I will get from the model, 95 situations or 95 occurrences, this model predicted correctly. It means that model is predicting 95 situations where it says it's in a case of overboil and it overboiled also. So I predicted overboil and the real overboil also happened. So that is what the 95 times, right? There's a number here which indicates 5, which says that there are 5 incorrect negative predictions. Oh, now what's the negative predictions over here? Can anyone explain? When I say 5 times the incorrect negative predictions over here, so what does this 5 indicate?
So basically, actually it overboiled, but it showed as not boiled, not overboiled.
Correct. So I was predicting wrong, but actually this happened. So now we'll see that what will be the impact of this case. So there's a scenario when we predicted there is no overboil and actual overboil happened. Now this is something which we were trying to avoid actually. So we will be losing the whole chemical and we will also be spending time in cleaning the same. Though the number of situations this happens is 5 only, but we'll see that what is the impact of that. Right? Now there's a condition here which is 63 times, which is an incorrect positive predictions. Incorrect positive predictions means I predicted overboil, but actual overboil doesn't happen. So what is the situation here? Because I have decided that whenever I will predict the overboil, I will add that anti-foaming agent into the chemical, right? So every time, all these 63 times I have added that chemical, but actual overboil doesn't happen, right? So it means that whatever addition I have done, it just gets lost. I will lost that value of that chemical into this. So 63 times such incidences happen. Now there are 837 incidents where we predicted correctly. There's no overboil, and then actually there was no overboil. So the correct negative predictions are 837. So these are the numbers that you will get from the confusion matrix of the model. We have not still assessed the business impact of this. We have only got this number. So all confusion matrix will give me these numbers. So I got 95, 5, 63, 837. Now, if I just go by the understanding of a data scientist from and just looking at this number, what is your understanding coming out of this? So immediately you will see this is in a very good model. And there are certain measures in the data science. One is the accuracy, the second is the precision, and then recall. So we'll just assess these percentages over here. So accuracy, when we want to see that, how often do you predict correctly? So now it comes to all true predictions, all false predictions. I will be just taking into account all of them. So 95 times I have predicted true, and 837 times I predicted false correct. Fine. So how many times you have predicted correctly? You just add those green cells over here. So you'll get 95 plus 837 out of the total predictions that I have done. So I have done total 95, 837, 5 and 63, all of them put together. So we'll get 93% is this accuracy of this model. Again, we are not reaching to any conclusion by just looking at this 93% fascinating number that it's already above 90%, and I should immediately decide, yeah, it's a very good model to go about this. So that is what I'm just trying to give you a sense over here, that my model is saying 93% accuracy. What does it mean to my business? That's a question we should keep in mind. The another measure coming out is precision. So all these measurements are coming out of this statistical algorithm itself, or the any of the algorithm that you will apply over here. Precision says that how many of your predicted overboil or this boil over conditions actually boil over. How many times you predicted that it boil over, but and how many times it actually happened. So we'll see that the 95%, and because 63 are the situations which I predicted boil over, but it doesn't happen. Okay? So precision says that 95, now you count the cell where you have predicted boil over and actual boil over happened. Now, second is the cell below it, 63%. We predicted boil over, but it doesn't happen. So how many of you predicted boil over? Actually, boil over is 95 divided by 95 plus 63, that is 60%. So 60% is the precision over here. Third is the recall. How many of all real boil overs do you find? How many times the boil over happened, and how many times you found it actually? So total boil over happened are 95 which you predicted, and 5 which you don't predict, which you failed to predict actually. So total boil over happened in these 900 instances are basically, or I'm not sure, 900 or even more. So how many times this real boil over happened? 95 times I have predicted, 5 times I have not predicted. So total 100. So we have predicted 95 times out of 100. Total boil over happens are 100, and out of that I am able to predict 95. So 95% is the recall here. So these are the 3 statistical measures that are coming out over here. Now we need to see how it has an impact on the business. Now this is something which I was trying to say, that people often make a crucial mistake here. They treat both the cells are equally or of equal importance to the business, and we have already realized that no, they are not of equal importance. So all your false positive and false negative are not of equal importance to the business. They have a different impact into the business. So let's try to assess that quickly. Now we will be assessing the business value here. So we'll be preparing a business impact matrix. So how this prediction that I have got from the model, how it will be make an impact onto my business. So we have some numbers over here. So my chemical in this vat cost total 40 lakh rupees. So once you are preparing this chemical is worth 40 lakh rupees. If I'm able to sell this chemical completely as it is, I will be able to get a 40 lakh rupees profit out of it. If I am adding an anti-foaming agent to this vat, then it cost me 8 lakh rupees. So to prevent the overboil, if I add an anti-foaming agent, it cost me, the additional chemical will cost me 8 lakh rupees. So now let's try to prepare this boil over business impact matrix. Now, when you predicted overboil and when you have a real overboil, what will be the value that you get out of one preparation here? Can you just try to understand this? So I predicted overboil, and then there's a real boil over situations. but I predicted, so I can prevent that by adding an anti-foaming agent. So what is the total spend amount I have spent in that preparation
8
for
lakhs.
that? How much?
8 lakhs, the anti-foaming agent.
No,
that
no.
I mean.
What will be the total value of this chemical
32
that is
lakhs.
being prepared?
32 lakhs.
32 lakhs. Because 40 lakh is the right value of the chemical. So I can sell this chemical at 40 lakh rupees, but I have spent 8 lakhs to prevent the overboil. So just a difference that how much I get out of selling this and how much I have spent on this. So 32 lakhs is something I get a value over here. Is this understood by all? How this
Yes.
32 lakhs come?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now let's try to see the predicted no overboil condition. So now we will just see that what is the value that I will write over here. So I incurred 80 lakh rupees of loss in one occurrences of this event. It means that I have lost, first of all, the complete 40 lakh rupees because the chemical is now run out of the composition. So it's a completely waste. And now I have to spend additional 40 lakh rupees in cleaning, preparing everything that I need to do for the next batch. So in that case, I have assessed the total loss that I incurred by one single occurrences of this situation, when there is a real boil over and it is not being predicted, and I have lost the whole chemical inside the vat. So loss of the chemical plus loss of the resources in terms of cleaning, downtime while cleaning happens. So that cost another 40. So one occurrence will incur the 80 lakh rupees of the loss. Now, when it comes to the real no overboil, but I predicted overboil. So what will be the number over here again?
8 lakhs.
No, so you predicted overboil, but no real overboil happened. So because you have predicted overboil, so you have added 8 lakh rupees.
Yes, sir.
But actual boil over doesn't happen. So again, the same cost will be there. So 40 minus 8 will be the 32 that I got here. Because my chemical is not overboiled. Now it is intact actually.
There is a waste of 8 lakhs.
Yeah, I unnecessarily predicted. That, and I put the chemical inside this. So 8 lakh is that's a simple loss into that actually. So I have to subtract that. The value that I will get is 32 lakh rupees here. Now what should come in the last column, the last cell?
40 lakhs, sir.
Yeah, 40 lakh, because I predicted there's no overboil, so I have not added anything to it, and I am able to save the whole chemical, so I can sell it to 40 lakh rupees. So now this is the business impact matrix I have prepared based on these predicted and the real scenarios. So this confusion matrix is now converted into a business impact matrix of one occurrence. Fine. Now with this kind of a value understanding that is coming out from one occurrence here, I need to prepare a value matrix now. So I need to go with a value matrix, which is a multiplication of the number of occurrences with the value that you will be getting out of one occurrences. Fine. So now in this case, what I will do, I will just multiply the confusion matrix, which predict that 95 times I will be able to predict the first cell. So I will be able to save 32 into 95. So that is 95 into 32 lakhs is the value that is coming out over here. Fine. Then the value is here. So because I understand 80 lakhs is the loss every time I get this kind of situation, and it happened 5 times. So I have incurred minus 400 lakhs rupees loss here. Then the situation here again. So you have 63 times this situation happened, and 32 lakhs is the value that you have added over here. And the last one is the 33,480 lakhs. So I have predicted 837 times. There is no overboil, and I am able to sell the whole chemical for 40 lakh rupees. So with this values now, which are coming from your confusion matrix prepared from the data that you are getting from your model. And now I have prepared the business impact matrix. So this business impact matrix is very important over here. And I need to understand the implication of all false positive, false negative scenarios and the true scenarios. So that based on that, now I can figure it out. The total revenue out of this 900 runs that I will do, I will be able to get a total revenue of 38,136 lakhs, 38,136 lakhs. So I have predicted now. So this is the total revenue assessment that I did based on the prediction that are coming out from my machine learning model. Now this is the scenario which we are discussing right now from a machine learning model. Now we need to compare this with the baseline. So we were discussing how to compare. So this again 38,136 lakhs, I need to compare with the existing scenarios. So what I will do the comparison now. So I will compare with the two scenarios. First of all, I was not applying machine learning and I was not adding anything to the chemical. So I will be permitting all the overboil. So in that case, never add the anti-foaming chemical to the product. And let's see that I'm trying to save the money on the anti-foaming chemical, but how it will be impacting the overall outcome of my business. So in this case, the total revenue will be 28 lakhs. We'll see that because we are not predicting anything compulsorily. We are not adding anything. So we'll be allowing the maximum overboil that can happen. So in this case, these predictions will now go over here. You see this number, how this 8,000 lakhs are coming up over here. Did you get that idea? Because we are not predicting anything. Everything is basically accounted into this situations. So it means that I am not predicting. So all real boilovers will be incurring in the same loss. So it means that these 95 scenarios which I was predicting earlier now are not being predicted. We are by default not adding anything to the chemical VAT. So 5 plus 95 all are being now added over here, and every time we incur the 80 lakhs rupees of loss, so that's how minus 8,000 lakhs being coming over here. And these are the amount that we saved on the total runs. So with this, I got the 28,000 lakhs is the scenario that I can get a revenue of 28,000 lakhs when I will not add anything. I will not take any action. Let the boil over happens as it is happening right now. And based on the occurrences, as many times it happens, I get this total revenue. Second scenario is that I will always add the boil over this chemical. So always assuming that 100% boil over is happening, and I will keep on adding 8 lakh rupees every time. I will add this chemical every time to this chemical, and will prepare this matrix. So I will get this. If I'll add chemical every time, so it means that I will be getting a total revenue of 32,000 lakh rupees. So all the occurrences, I will just multiply it by 32 lakhs, because every time now my batch is 40 lakhs minus 8 lakhs, 32 lakhs. I will just multiply with that all occurrences over here. That will lead to this 32,000 lakh rupees revenue. Now, these are the two baselines actually. So one is we never add the chemical, we always add the chemical, and we will be deploying the machine learning model. Now, these scenarios which you see here coming from always add is kind of a situation we are doing the preventive maintenance. So if I found a component to be replaced every 6 months, I will be replacing forcefully that component after every 6 months. Second scenario, never add means I always allowed the failure to happen. Once the component fails, I will order, I will buy, and I will place the another component into the machine, and then the machine will run. So these are the two extreme scenarios we were discussing. It's always fail, or it's always basically replacing after certain fixed time. That is what the preventive maintenance is supposed to do. Now, where does the machine learning model fits in over here? So now you can see this once you get these numbers being predicted over here. So your machine learning model, once you deploy it, it gives you total revenue of 38,136 lakh rupees as the revenue. Once you use the always add model, you will be predicting 32,000 lakh rupees as a revenue. And once you are not adding anything, you are at a 28,000 lakh rupees revenue. Now, with this kind of a comparison, once you are coming out for your problem, nobody will say don't apply the machine learning model. And the moment you decide, once you see that you are already above the current baseline, in case of any of your deployment, I think then your model is now decently predicting that whatever the confidence that you are having on the model is still giving you a higher revenue as compared to the other scenarios, as compared to your baseline scenarios. I think that is something is very important to understand in this case. So with this quick example, what we have attempted is what kind of business impact it is making, and how can I convert those numbers coming out from the your model to make a sense for anyone to understand what will be the impact of the machine learning model. I hope with this example you are able to get a sense how to justify, and with this kind of statistics or with this kind of reasoning, if you go with any one of the person in the company and then justify that, yeah, this is something I'm going to make a profit to you, he will never say no to the machine learning deployment. But I will be able to see with these numbers. Now, if you change the model, if your numbers in the confusion matrix changes, I think this whole scenario will be changing. So till you are crossing any of the baseline, you should refine the model. And the moment you decide that I have crossed the 1,000 lakh rupees as the baseline, so that kind of a target you can set in the beginning itself. From the current baseline, if I will be spending so much amount in implementing the machine learning, so certainly there's a cost to it. Add that cost, and on top of that, you can see that, yeah, if I cross this number, I'm ready to deploy this model. So that is how the decency of this business model can be justified. I hope that you get some sense out of this learning, and that is a very important learning to take from this. I think this is again published in one of the good paper that I have just gone through, and I really find it good reasoning in case of a business, which is completely missing because we keep on playing around the models without having an understanding of the business impact. Right. So for the remaining time, I will just quickly give you an work to start with the Python machine learning, and which I will now add in the course also, but I would like to explain you the same also. So you need to start the basic machine learning exercise or understanding using a Python now, and we'll prefer to use the same Colab environment. So let me share with you my desktop, and then I will let you just quickly go through or run through the example actually, so that you will be able to attempt the same. So let me just. So what you can do now, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you are able to see some of the Colab notebooks that I have created over here. You also have to start experimenting with the data set. So now you have already experimented with the vehicle data in the MATLAB example that we have done earlier, or we'll also share some of the data set with you. So there are some data sets I have kept over here for experimentation. So there is one data set of the height weight ratio. So you have not ratio, height and weight. So for what height, what should be the weight that you can predict through this. We have a vehicle data over here, which is the same data set that you have used in the MATLAB to predict the miles per gallon. We will try to now attempt the same with the Python also. And then there's a data set of the Titanic that we have over here. There's another data set of the housing data set over here. So there are certain data set we will be experimenting now while applying these algorithms. So what we can do, we can start with the basic regression model here. And the library that will be used over here is the scikit-learn. So let me just quickly take you through this example, how we will be implementing the scikit-learn over here. Are you able to see my screen now? So the regression with scikit-learn is now clear to you?
Yes, sir.
So there's a site of scikit-learn that's a very good repository for all the resources. So if you can see here, this is on a website of the scikit-learn. So you will find a lot of resources available over here, different algorithms, different functions over here. So you will find a complete APIs available here for the classification, regression, and clustering. You will get a lot of examples over here. Some of the examples of the dimensionality reduction also being given over here, but we'll go slowly. We'll first experiment with the regression and classification that we have done with the MATLAB. Let's try to do the same experiment over here. And there are plenty of examples being given over here. So I think there's a lot of learning that can happen. So as I was mentioning that unless you start experimenting with it, you will not be getting a depth into that. So what we will do, we'll start with a simple example over here. So what you can do, you need to have some understanding of these foundation libraries over here, which are not machine learning library, but they are the libraries helpful in preparing the data for deploying the machine learning. So we will be importing the NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib for visualization, and Seaborn. These two are for the visualization only, and NumPy for handling the arrays, and Pandas for handling the files that or the data, basically putting them into the data frame and arranging them for the machine learning application. So these are the basic imports that you are supposed to do in your Python program before you start with. Fine. Now, so what you can do, you will just execute this. So I'm just executing this particular block of code here. So as soon as you execute, I am sure that some of you might have done experiment in the Colab. So it will assign some resources to you for your application. So it will assign some RAM and the space for running this model. So you can see here the RAM and disk is being assigned over here. So this is being successfully executed now. Now, what you can do, you can keep your data into the Google Drive as I have done. So from this, you can access your Google Drive also here. And for that, you need to mount the Google Drive. So as soon as you click this, I think there's a piece of code that you need to run that will appear in your notebook itself. So I will be running this. So once you run this, you need to authenticate for accessing the Google Drive by this Colab program. So what I will be doing, I will be just authenticating myself, signing in. Just copy the key that has been appeared over here, and you can just paste this authorization code over here and press enter. Yeah, so once it is being authorized, now the drive is being mounted over here. So now after this, you will have an access to the drive in this case. It will be coming up slowly with time. I'm not sure what I was using, but it will show the content in the home drive. So I've already run this. So the drive is already mounted over here. So now this is the URL of the folder where I kept the data set. So you can just define a variable over here. I've defined this URL over here. So where I have a data set. Now every block of the code, you'll get an option to either add a code or a text that you can keep on adding here. So you can add any of the line of the code that you want over here. Now, this is the example that we are taking over here, which is in a file of the weight and the height distribution over in that file. So what I will be doing, I will be using a function in the Pandas, which is mainly used for reading the CSV file or the Excel file. So there are a lot of functions available in the Pandas because I have already created this imported Pandas as PD. So I will be calling a function over here and we will be now reading this data into a data frame. So after this execution of this instruction, now this file is now being loaded in the data frame. And I can check what is being captured in the data frame. So first of all, let me just clear the output of this cell. So clear output. Yeah. Now I will be executing this. So I just want to clear the output over here. So we'll just. So there are certain functions to understand the data that is coming over here. So with this, once you read the file, there's a function which give you the header as well as the 5 data points over here. So once you run this function on the data frame that you have captured, so df.head will, once you run this, it will show you this is the type of data that you have now in the file. So it has been now read into the data frame. So you have a gender, you have a height, you have a weight over here. That is how you will be looking at this data. There's another function, data df.info. If you just run it, you will be able to get to know how many values are there. So you have 10,000 entries in this data set. So you will be able to see the overall information about this data that you have read right now from this file. This is in a CSV file. Same is true with the XLS file also. So that is where I was just trying to give you an idea that you should also experiment with these instructions, and you can add these instructions on your own. Now, there's a possibility that this data set may have null value inside it. It means that there's not a number kind of or a missing value inside this. So you can find out where are the missing values and how many missing values are in the data set, and you can remove them before you apply the machine learning model. So I think those kind of function you need to explore yourself also. Now what we will be doing, we will be using a Seaborn library over here to do a scatter plot to see the distribution of the height and weight in this case. So if I run this code over here, so we'll get this. So this is the kind of a distribution that you have. So still we have not applied any machine learning model over here. We are just trying to visualize the data. So till here we are just reading the data. What I was just giving you an idea about that, these are the pre-processing or the preparation step, data preparation part. You can read the data, you can check the data, whether it's clean data is not. Clean data means that you can remove the not a number kind of entries over here right now. Now, with this data, we will be now trying to visualize before we apply any of the technique here, how that is being scattered here. So there's a scatter plot that you can use, so you can visualize this. Now, after that, I can start the machine learning modeling over here. So sklearn, as you have seen over here, this library has all the API functions available over here, which will be useful for applying a different machine learning model. Otherwise, you can also search here the linear, for example, regression. So you'll get this first one itself, sklearn.linear_model and the linear regression. So what I am supposed to do now, I have to import this. So from sklearn.linear.model. So all linear models are available over here. Or you can see from the user guide also. So you'll have this user guide for all supervised learning models over here, unsupervised learning models over there. And you can just go and click this. So you get all these linear models are available over here. So you can slowly start experimenting with some of these models. Some of these tasks being automated for you in case of MATLAB. That's how you have learned that regression learner app, which was just doing all these things hidden at the background. So you may not be getting a sense of that, but here, because you will be writing in a single piece of code yourself, so you will be able to see that. So what I have done, I have imported this linear regression over here. Then I have also imported another helping library over here, which is basically dividing the whole data set into the train and testing. So train test split can happen because you may now recall that in the supervised learning, we will be dividing the whole data set into the training data as well as the test data. So that is what you can do over here. You can see some of the values over here. So what I can just trying it out. So these are some of the exploratory things you can do in this Colab notebook itself. So what I have done, I have just extracted the X and Y. So X values are the height values over here and Y values are the weight values over here. So I have just prepared the two data set over here. Now, if I want to see what is in X and Y, what I can do, I can just go over here, write a piece of a code here, put a X and then run it. And you can see what is there in the X. No, I didn't run this, so I have to run this first. And I have just preparing this. And once I did this, now I can run this X. So this is the data in the X. So it's an array of the features. Now these are the features that I am using from that data. So if you just go with the data, what I have, the gender, height, and weight. So what I'm trying to do, I am trying to predict the weight. I'm trying to use an attribute height only. So I'm using only one attribute here. So this is a very simple one, weight and height. We are starting with a very simple one to explore with. We have only one attribute. We are taking only one attribute height, and we are using one attribute, target variable, that is the weight over here. So what I have done in X, I will be having only this row vector, this column vector here. So what I have done, I have just extracted the column vector only. The X is the column vector, which is giving me the weight. No, sorry, it's a height, and then Y is the weight. So then if I just run the Y, this is the array of the weight vector. So in this case, I have the features and I have the target now. Now I need to split this whole data set into the train and test. So this is the function which is there. So train test split is the function which will give me the 4 vectors over here: X train, X test, Y train, Y test. How it will be splitting? It will be splitting from the X and Y, that is the original vectors. And I will be taking 20% as the test size. So 0.2 is the test size. So I will be taking 20% as the test size. Now here you can add the randomness like a seed actually, so that you will be getting a repetitive results. How randomly it will be picking up the training and test data, that will be decided by this. So you can also play around with this number. So 0 is a one method of selecting the random training and testing data. If you place 1, and it will give you the another shuffling happened actually over here. So with this X train and test split, I just run this. I have split the X and Y. Now you can see this also. See, if you want to check it, it's in a quite interactive. So you can go to the code over here, and you can see that X underscore train dot shape is a function over here which will give me the size of this. So if you can see here, it's in a 8,000, 1. So out of 10,000 total data set, this is a 1 column vector. So 8,000 rows and 1 column. You get the size of the matrix from here. So X train dot shape, I get it. Similarly, the X test will be the 2,000, 1, and same is with the Y train and like this. You can, if you want to see what is in the X train, you can just see that also, X train, and you can just run it. You will get to know what are the values in the X train, but it doesn't make much sense, but you'll get an idea that yeah, X train is another 8,000 by 1 matrix over here. Same is it. So with this single call of a function train test split, you will get all these train test data set now. Now I will be starting the modeling from here. So what I will do, I will instantiate the regression model. So model I defined, this is my variable. So I define the linear regression model. And there's a function called fit. It's a single call of this function, which will fit the linear regression to your data. So what I will do, I will call this model.fit, and X train is the same column vector which we have get split after this split we are getting. And Y train is the, so this is the training data set. For this X train, I know the Y train. And once I put this X train, Y train into the model fit, I will be training my model for the fitness on these 2 column vectors, and which I can run now. So once you run this, Your model is now run. Now you can check actually. So what you can do, you can just validate, check the score. So now this is the 85% score you are getting. Means it is 85% fitting the data set over here. Now this is in a linear fit, so you will be getting the coefficients and intercepts also that you can check. Now let's see that if I change this random state to 1, let's see that to this experiment, I change this random state into the 1. Now I'll get a different data set. The number will remain same. It will again be 8,000 by 1. But the values will be different. Now X train, if you try to see, X train will be the different values that will be captured as a training data set over here. And let's see that how the model is performing now. So once I do this and I fit the model again, and let's check the score this time. So it's almost same. So it's not changing. It means there is not much variation in the data set. So it is not getting impacted. But same way you can try out with the other values. So that is the way you will be doing more experiment with this. Now this is the score I have checked with the trained data set. I need to check with the test because that is the purpose of this. So I should also be getting the same score with the test data. So let's see here. I just run this for the test and I will be getting a similar score, which is again 86%. So it means that for the data set I've trained this model, and for the test it is almost same. So it is a good model over here. Now for any of the data set or the attributes you want to predict now. So for X test, I want to do a prediction. So I will be now predicting the weight for all the height that I have placed into the X test. I have just checked the model over here, but still I have not predicted over here. So what I can do, I can just run this. So my Y predict test is now being prepared. Now I need to visualize this, how this is being coming out. So these are some of the functions that you can look at. Now I will be using this matplotlib over here. These are some of the functions for plotting anything in using the library matplotlib over here. So again, a simple one, have some similarity with the MATLAB kind of an implementation also. So I'm trying to plot the X scatter and Y scatter because this is the scatter one. On top of that, I would like to plot the prediction, the X test and Y prediction one. So what I've done, this is the initial data set, X test and Y test, which is appearing as a scatter over here. On top of that, I have drawn a line over here. This is basically the line coming out from the regression fit. And then you can see the distribution around this. So that is how the 85% it is coming up. So this is the way actually you have run this regression one with these simple steps. Only my recommendation is that once only 8-10 steps are the key steps over here. Once you do this exercise on your own, I am sure that you will get familiar with what each piece of code is doing over here. My recommendation is that you please explore the library based on the way you are using now. Let's not go and study the scikit-learn document like this as such. It's not that useful. Unless you apply it, unless you write some piece of code for help that you can use over here. You can just go and refer the library over here, and then you can see if you want to apply some another model over here, for example, the ridge regression and classification. You will get an examples over here. You will get the kind of an function that you are supposed to call, and then you can experiment in your the Colab file. So this is something I would like you to start experimenting and trying it out. So what I will do, I will add one example of the regression. So I will place this Colab file for your help along with the data file. So please import that into your Google Drive data as well as the Colab. Run the basic instructions the way I have recommended. There's another one for the classification. The similar way you can follow the classification workflow also. So try to do this. Once you are familiar with this sample data set that I've given over here, which are easy to understand, I will give you another data set to apply this. And there are new learnings happening through this application to the new data set. One thing that I have intentionally left out over here, which will be coming out as a problem once you attempt it. Whenever we are trying to apply a regression model, I need all data set over here as a numerical data set. Now, gender is in a categorical data over here. Now, there is an issue with the categorical data. If I include the gender also, so first of all, I have just used only one attribute here. If I need to do it for the multiple attributes, how this model will get changed, how the implementation will change. So instead of having an X as a matrix of one attribute only, if I want to have more than one attribute to be included in the X, how those changes will happen first of all. If the second attribute is categorical, it's not the numerical one. What are the difficulties that you will get over here? So if you experiment, you will come to know about what are the difficulties. Then you have to look out for the solutions. You will search, you will do Google search, you will search in the Stack Exchange, what are the issues, how that are being handled. And appropriately, then you will find out all those functions available into the libraries. So you need to have these documentation for the NumPy, Pandas, and Matplotlib along with the scikit-learn. So all these have a good, nice websites. You can refer these websites for any reference information that you require. There are many examples also. At the same time, you need to find out the solution for the problems that you are experiencing while attempting for a different data set. So this is the learning that I want all of you should start, and we will take up a Python problem in the upcoming lab, where you will be more doing an exercise. You will not be doing as such an individual learning. You will be attempting for a given data set. So that is all for, I think, today's class, though I have extended additional 15 minutes, but that is